Let me tell you, at this point, families were split, never ever saw one another again. So some of the men were taken this way, okay. Some of the girls that were selected to go into the camp were taken through there. You were just told to go that way. And you know the road there, where does that go?
The gas chambers.
That's it.
What happened when you arrived at camp?
Well, we were taken to a building like this, which we didn't know what it was, but it was called the sauna, not like you and I understand it, a processing place. And the first thing that happened to you, you were stripped, everything was taken from you, you were smeared with a green fluid, your hair was shaved everywhere.
That was then packaged and shipped off for processing. Hair was used both to create cloth and to line submarines and as detonators.
And then you were tattooed, and believe you me, that was when you felt you were no longer the same person.
When that tattoo was placed on your arm, you weren't what your parents had given you as your name, you became that number, and that was your identification completely taken away.
Not only is it a disgusting thing to do to human beings, but that's my grandma, and they wanted to turn her into an animal.
Without your hair and without your clothing, you lose something very distinctive about you. And there are people who remember at that point that they looked ridiculous.
It was hard to imagine how she survived. Every corner she turned, there was something trying to stop her from living.
First of all, survival depended on the place of work. If you were working outside, and you know, the commandos, which are work parties, you hadn't had a prayer to survive for long. The other thing you couldn't survive was without a pair of shoes. Well, the problem was that you were issued wooden clogs. Your clogs would get stuck in the mud. Your feet would rub. They would get infected, and you were dead. If you didn't have your bowl, you were dead, because nobody would give you their bowl. So survival depended on if you could not think about anything, just have a tunnel vision and think like an animal. Just picture yourself, what does an animal do? What does an animal need? Well, it doesn't need very much just to live, but the first thing it needs to get away from the predators, get away from all these people that are trying to kill you.
There were capos who were prison foremen, and they became more cruel than the German masters themselves.
Well, how do you get away from these people? Any of the ruling princes could come up to you and kill you.
And consequently, you couldn't figure out a strategy for survival. At Auschwitz, there was no why. It was done by whim.
Did you know that the wooden sheds were actually meant for 52 horses? And so they put these bunk things up there.
And there were 1,000 people in there.
And 1,000 people inside, that's right.
What happened the first thing in the morning when you woke up?
You were woken up with the sound of whistles, roughly around about 4 in the morning. So roll calls took place twice a day, and roll calls was one of the greatest terrors of the camp. Whistles blew, and everybody, there were screams, out, 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 schnell, raus, raus. Total chaos. 1,000 people had to rush out of this door. And you see the ground, you're looking at grass, well, you must look at mud. The whole thing was just one sea of mud. I've always said, if you found a blade of grass, what would you do with it? You'd eat it. So people were just staggering around the mud, but of course you had to stand to attention.
Selection didn't just take place on arrival at Auschwitz, it was a daily occurrence. In fact, any time that prisoners were together, if anybody at any point in time tipped over into that place where they were no longer useful to the Nazis, they could simply be selected and sent into the gas chamber.
People just collapsed and died.
Yeah.
Died of tiredness, of exhaustion, of shock.
Did you ever have to collect the corpses after roll call?
Yes,
You
yes.
had to do it.
Oh, yes. When I was in the Leichenkommando, this is what we did. Well, I don't know if people realize, but when you are hungry, hunger is a total obsession. You're just thinking, hunger, hunger, I must have something to eat. I must, if I don't eat something, I'll die.
It depended where you were in line as to how much nutrition you got. If you were at the beginning of the line, you got pure water. If you were at the end of the line, you had a problem because they might run out of food. And if you knew the person who was ladling out the food, then in one sense, they dug deep and they got the stuff in the soup that landed at the bottom, whether it's a potato or a carrot or something.
Hunger is the worst thing that anybody can experience, I think.